It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander Rec for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the Commander in front of us on my quest out brew the Magic world. We're starting our last week of Mirza Karlov Manor content. Man, I've really enjoyed covering this set. I hope this is something that you've enjoyed brewing around or editing your decks with. I think that's the best part of new cards. It's not always new decks. Sometimes it's editing our old decks. But today we're talking about a commander that I liked the look of when I originally saw it, and I think leads to a ton of fun play lines. And I always love when a commander gives us a fun new way to play the game or try the game out. And that is Judith, Carnage, Connoisseur. And as always, the deck list is going to be down description below for you. Judith is a 5-mana 3/4 human shaman. It says whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, we can choose one. That spell gains Death Touch and Lifelink, or we create a 2/2 imp with whenever this creature dies, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. What I like about Judith is, every time we cast an instant or sorcery, we get our option of one of two pretty cool abilities. The first, Death Touch and Lifelink on spells is actually a lot better than you think it is. First off, because there's a lot of cheap spells that deal 1 damage to every creature our opponents control, making it effectively a board wipe with Judith out. And that's important. Now, the second ability, giving us 2/2 imp when it dies, deals 2 damage to the opponent, allows us to do a little bit of aristocrats if we want to. But I think it also just creates a board state where we're going to tell our opponents, cool, either I'm going to ram these into you and you have to try to block them and kill them, or I'm going to block with them and I'm going to now run the risk of damaging the entire table in the process. I think this is what I really like when it comes to it's the messing around with spells and not just playing spells is what I like the most about kind of these more Grixis style spell decks. But I think what Judith does really well is towing that fine line. We're going to take a large advantage of Death Touch and Lifelink, because if you think about it, some of the biggest cards in the deck and some of the deck we're really going to use to our advantage are things like Blazing Volley, End the Festivities, Scouring Sands, Tectonic Hazard. These just deal 1 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. The really cool thing about Judith is Death Touch and Lifelink on this. So say our opponents have 10 creatures between the 3 of them, right? This is now 13 life we're gaining off of this spell. And every creature that got damaged is now dying because it has Death Touch. So if you think about it, this is now a one-sided board wipe that is also gaining us life. And I think the life part's important because we can use things like Veto, whenever we gain life, target opponent loses that much life. And something like Sanguine Bond, same effect but on an enchantment, to leverage that damage right back towards our our opponents. We can also kind of take that and put that in tandem with what you would normally expect out of a spell slinging deck. The Electric Stag Fields, the Flamesmiths, the Kessig Flamebreaker, the Torwalkie, these creatures that are dealing damage to our opponent every time we cast a spell, and that allows us to compound on that we're already doing. This deck gets to play one of my favorite copies of that, one of my favorite ones of those ability, which is Professor Onyx, the Liliana's card from Strixhaven. Whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery, each opponent loses 2 and we gain 2. So again, with those abilities out, we're getting more. So this is kind of where we're taking the damage side. We also are playing things like Jai's Emulating Inferno. And Blood for the Blood God becomes even better in this deck, nuking everybody for 8 for this. That now becomes a 24-point, swing of life in our favor. Things like Comet Storm can be used to deal damage across the board. But, something like Jai's with enough mana into it is going to deal a bunch of damage and gain us a bunch of life. So here you have these effects that become detrimental to our opponent. We're playing that new Prisoner's Dilemma for the commander decks. Each opponent secretly chooses Silence or Snitch. If each one chose Silence, 4 damage to each of them. If each opponent chose Snitch, 8 damage to each of them, and if otherwise it deals 12 damage to each opponent who chose Silence. Again, this is a really interesting ability because it'll end up actually netting us a ton of life if we give it Death Touch and Lifelink. And now, holy crap, we just gain a bunch of life in one turn in a deck that you probably wouldn't expect to gain this much life. But okay, So we have the spell slinging side with the damage and the death touch and lifelink. Let's talk about the second buddy with the imps. Well, there's a couple ways we can do this. I forgot to mention. I'm sorry. You're playing things like Bloodletter as well to double that damage. But okay, let's start with the token side. Well, there's cards that make tokens when we cast spells. Sedgemoor Witch being the one that I'm choosing to play here because it actually gains its life when those pests die and can trigger other effects, right? But we have ways to sacrifice them, right? Yahenni can sack another creature, give it indestructible, and make that imp die and deal two damage out. We have things like Mirkwood Bats that's going to pay us off making and getting rid of those tokens. Pluto's Plunderer, whenever a creature we control dies, we get a treasure. That and Mahadi can kind of fund our deck with treasures as our creatures are dying. Things like Blood Artist is going to help us with that creature dying and doling some damage out. And I think that becomes important as we get towards the mid to the late game that we're trying to not just dole damage out, but try to have a decent board state with these tokens and keep doling damage out. We have things like Soulfim try to double our damage, O'Hare Axonil try to make that damage up to its power. Again, just to kind of make our effects hit harder rather than just getting two every time. Harmonic Prodigy both doubles Judith's trigger, meaning with Harmonic Prodigy and Judith out, we can actually get both, which is pretty cool. But there are a few shamans and wizards in our deck that are going to get doubled, and so we will happily take that. Raphael seemed really fun here, giving all those imps +1/+1 in lifelink, allowing them to become pretty difficult to deal with, I would hope, as 3/3s with lifelink. They become a little bit harder to play around. A lot of our spells are based on the damage, but again, we're also playing some of those sacrifice the token things for effects. Corrupted Conviction, Plumb the Forbidden, Village Rites, Deadly Dispute, Demand Answers. Sacrificing things to draw a big score, unexpected windfall for some card draw. We're playing, I think, what most people would normally expect for Rakdos removal, but I think we're also going to play things like Ashnod's Altar to sack those tokens for mana, and again, to get those death triggers off. Revel and Riches gives us an alternate win con as our opponent's creatures die as we kill them with Judith's effect. I think we could run the risk of getting a pretty easy win with Revel and Riches if we can get it out. So my hope here is that you see that we're trying to double prong attack this game. Use Judith's first ability to do damage, gain us some life, and probably try to wipe the board. The second is either use the imps or other creatures or some light aristocrat style effects to gain advantage and push forward. But let's hit a play test of this guy. We keep a 3-lander with Yahenni, which is great to see. We also see Veto, one of the ones that's going to help once Judith is out. Gyrod's Belligerence is an interesting card. Deals X damage as you choose among any number of creatures. Whenever a creature is dealt damage this way, you populate. Whenever a creature dealt this damage this way dies, populate. What's really fun about Gyrod's Belligerence with the Judith out is if we give this death touch and lifelink, every creature that it kills is getting us a populate trigger, and we can make a bunch of those imps if they're already out. And then, of course, big score for draw. So I like it. 3 lands already gets us to Yahenni or Veto, and we have a chance to draw some more. Well, turn 1 Arcane Signet's definitely going to help on our turn 1 draw, and there's pretty much no reason for us not to slam this down turn 2 and get us access to a little bit more mana. Now, turn 3, of course, 4 mana, we're a little bit off Judith. I like the idea of something like Electric Static Field. I like the idea of something like Yahenni. Of course, the only bad part about Yahenni is we don't have anything to protect it, but I still think it's an interesting thing that would get better. I mean, next turn, if we slam Judith with 5 mana, what are we doing as well, right? Because we don't want to just slam Judith and all the time and pass. We'd like to play something if we can. I think I just get Yahenni down here. Working. We draw a Luxury Suite. I think I would just throw down Judith here. Again, we hope it lives the turn. Try to pass back and take advantage of it. The next turn, we have a couple spells we can play to take advantage. Here we'll play the Phyrexian Tower, being at 6 mana, and this is where I would have to look at the board. If my opponents don't have a ton of creatures, I think I run Electric Static Field out here and just hold up this big score and do it on somebody's turn. Maybe pitch, Reliquary Tower or something, draw a couple cards, make a couple treasures, get the imp, and kind of push myself into the next turn where maybe I can set up this Belligerence. If we're playing against a token deck or we're playing against a deck that's spamming creatures, I think the Belligerence right now for 4 gets you Death Touch and Lifelink. Oh, that's right. Well, we wouldn't have a token, so we definitely want to do that. I think we would definitely do the field play, keep the big score up. And at some point before our turn, we would pitch that Reliquary Tower, draw 2, get 2 treasures. Now we come back to our turn with 7 mana. Now we have a Bloodletter, right? So now we have the Imp. I would just choose the Imp on the base score, obviously, since it's not dealing damage. Now I think would be a perfect time, right, for that Belligerence. Now we're up to X equals 5, give it Death Touch and Lifelink, burn up a couple up to 5 creatures, right? 5 creatures. And that could 5 triggers populate, or we could just, hit our opponents with 1 if need be. But I think this is the perfect turn for this. The field will deal a damage to each opponent when we cast it. We're going to get a bunch of those imps, and now we just run the risk of... We're threatening our opponents with the imps. When any of them die, they're losing 2, meaning now with 6 of them on the board, that's 12 damage at any time, and we present Yahenni as a way to do that, being able to just sack all of them in instant speed. So now we start to create a scenario where we can start harming our opponents and having that threat. This turn, we see the Bloodletter and Veto in our hand, right? Now we just plumb the Forbidden. This could potentially, depending on where our opponents are at, could potentially end at least one player's game. So if we cast the Bloodletter, we have those 6 imps, right? Those all deal 2 damage to our opponents when they die, right? Well, Bloodletter says whenever our opponents, lose life during their turn, they lose twice that much life. Meaning, let's say we plumb right now, and we can. So when we cast one, right, we can give a Death Touch or Lifelink or make an imp. We can't sack the imp to plumb the Forbidden, unfortunately, because we make it. We have to sacrifice our imps to plumb the Forbidden to cast it. So I would nuke all 6 of my imps at this point. I would get an imp from Judith, which is perfectly fine. We're already pinging our opponents for 2 with the field on this cast, right, with Bloodletter. I sack those 6. I'm going to draw 6 and lose 6 life. But here's the thing. Now all of those 2 damage triggers go on the stack, and that would be 24 to our opponents right now on the spot. And now we've drawn... I might have mana left. That was 2, 6. So I have mana left to do something. I could always try to cast another spell and and deal 2 more with Electrostatic Field or hold up something else. But again, now at this point, we could sack that imp we made on Judith to Yahenni to give it indestructible, get 4 more damage to the board. That's 28. And then maybe I just Undying Malice, one of my creatures, get another imp off of Judith. Electric Field deals 2 more, so now we're up to 30. Sack that imp to Yahenni. Now we're up to 34 damage this turn on turn, 6? Then that would probably wipe the entire board. So as you can see, this is one of these board states that all we need to do is get these imps out and get them sacrificed as one way for us to win the game. We didn't see any fun ways for us to really take advantage of damaging our opponents with spells. But hey, we didn't need to. We set up the right things, and we look at that. In one turn, we probably nuked the entire table. And if we had something that, gave our creatures, gave our, if we'd had something that gained us life when we dealt damage, or something like that, we could have done more. But again, that's one turn where we nuke 7 imps. Even without them, right, that would have been 14 damage to each. Even without the Bloodletter, that's 14, 15, 16, 17 damage to our opponents. And I mean, that's still a lot. You can't discount how much damage that is to each opponent, especially depending on where you're at in the game. But let me know, what do you think of Judith? Down in the comment section below. Again, I really like this deck. I thought this was really cool, a way to build Rakdos Spellslinger that incorporates a lot of things. I know Torwalki's kind of a popular commander in this space, but I like what Judith does a little bit better, and I think it just allows you to have a little bit more fun with what you're trying to play. But let me know what you think down in the comment section below, and I'll catch you guys next time.